All right, so last time, the Slutsky twins and I had a discussion about Ron Paul finally getting his way and getting his fellow lawmakers to vote on an amendment to audit the Fed. But I want to take this conversation a little bit further. Get someone who really believes in this to, tell me if it's the right way to go. I know it's a crazy idea to most people. I mean, this is one of our most long-standing institutions, one that a lot of people don't understand. And in a way, having the power to adjust interest rates of the dollar is something that affects the rest of the world. So we have to understand how powerful this is. And then if we look at recent announcements like Iran saying that their country gained $5 billion by replacing much of their dollars in their currency basket to euros, thanks to the falling rates of our dollar, we have to question how the Federal Reserve might play into that, if capitalism might be failing. But I have Adam Kokesh. He's a congressional candidate from New Mexico, and he's here to help me figure all this out. Adam, thanks for joining me. I want to ask you, what do you think about this amendment to audit the Federal Reserve? Do you think it's going far enough, or are you an end the Fed all the way guy?
It's a very exciting thing to see this amendment going through, but it's definitely not going far enough. It's a very important step in the right direction, though, and I'm excited to see 1207 pass so that we can get an audit, not so that we can get pieces of information on paper or numbers on a spreadsheet, but rather so that we can expose this fraud to the American people and really pull back the curtain. Because when people figure out how this thing works, no one supports it. No one goes, oh, yeah, we really need a central bank. We really need people who have this authority. Everybody wants to see it ended and return this country to a system of honest money and sound money that's backed by real commodities.
But I feel like one of the problems with pulling back the curtain, as you said, is that it's lawmakers that are going to be doing this. And if we put it into their hands, can we really trust them?
Well, I think audit, even then, it's not the lawmakers that are responsible for it. And we're not talking about transferring this authority or power from the Fed to the Congress. That's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. And Congress doesn't have that authority under the Constitution. American people are going to demand how the Fed really works is that we repeal legal tender laws. We repeal the restrictions on trading gold and silver so that we can have a true free market for money, which is nothing more than a medium of exchange. And what we have now is a government-granted monopoly on this particular product. And that's why we don't have an honest free market. We don't have a system of capitalism in this country. We have a system of corporatism and banksterism. And the government has become little more than a scam to steal from the poor to give to the rich. And the Federal Reserve System is the greatest mechanism of that.
But this is the system at the same time that people know. I mean, the Federal Reserve is considered one of those great American institutions. So how are people to really understand this? That, like, what would ending the Federal Reserve really mean? How do they now go about their business?
Well, that sounds a lot like the fallacy of too big to fail. And, we heard a lot about that with the financial institutions in the course of the bailouts, AIG, all these other great financial institutions. They're too big to fail. Well, the truth is they are too big to continue. And what we need to do is allow them to fail. And the way we can do that with the Federal Reserve is by simply opening up the concept of money to competition and allowing people to create their own currencies. In some places, we're already seeing this as local towns and communities are creating their currencies that are not backed by the wishful thinking of the federal government or the false promises of the Federal Reserve. And they're able to create
I have to interrupt you there. I mean, sure, there are a few little towns that are starting to make their own currency, but this is the dollar that we're talking about. I mean, at the moment, it still is the international reserve currency, although people are slowly starting to move away from it. I mean, what are the international repercussions going to be, too, if we do this?
Well, if we don't do this, you got to think about what are the repercussions then, because right now the dollar is collapsing. And the Federal Reserve, when it was instituted in 1913, was promised to stabilize the value of the dollar and instead has destroyed 97% of its value. And now we're seeing it coming to the edge of a cliff. And if we don't create the space, if we don't allow the economy and the American people to create a system that isn't prone to inflation, that isn't prone to this kind of failure, that isn't part of this grand scheme, then we're going to see a real collapse. We're going to see a lot more problems in the economy if we just let this thing go off a cliff and don't create some kind of alternative.
Well, Adam, I want to thank you for joining me. You're definitely not the only one out there saying this, and it seems like this really is a growing movement, and we will see. I mean, could this be the end of the Federal Reserve pretty soon? Now, we're going to move on.
We can only hope so.